Like to thank our sponsors today, Yadi, Kulka, FIA Capital Partners, San Ward Cashignano, and U.S. Pavement Services. Thank you.
And that's our sponsors. And this is me, Rick Kaplan. I'm the MC and the director of the events, the media director. You can find me at any of the social media platforms, or you can find me on NYREJ.com or NEREJ.com. And I'd be more than happy to help you with any kind of advertising needs, any information you want on future webinars, or if you're looking to submit articles or press releases, we're happy to help you with that. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator. And our moderator is Bill Widener. He's a managing partner, Keep My Gas LLC. Bill's career spans decades of experience in the sectors of residential brokerage, income property brokerage, real estate valuation, property finance, and construction. Bill is a commercial real estate broker, the host of the Realty Speak podcast, and recently co-founded Keep My Gas, which informs, educates, and facilitates the process to comply with New York City Local Law 152, periodic inspection of gas piping systems. I give you Bill Widener.
Thanks so much, Rick. And thank you, and also the New York Real Estate Journal, for creating this opportunity here from our three panelists. Jamie, Peter, and Scott are preeminent experts in their respective segments of the industry, and I really look forward to talking with them today. What I'd like to do first is just give a little background on each one of them, and then we'll get started. So, Jamie, you are a partner at the law firm of Boyle & Code in the Rochester area of New York. Your practice focuses on commercial and multifamily real estate. You represent investors as purchasers, sellers, regional banks, and lending transactions, and you defend property owners accused of violating fair housing and human rights law, and you provide consultation for compliance with federal, state, and local law. You are a registered New York State lobbyist, and I definitely want to hear more about that, and recently became the coalition leader of Under One Roof, which is an organization whose mission is to urge state lawmakers to address the damaging consequences of the HSTPA of 2019. That's the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. Peter, your firm, Hunt Real Estate Corporation, has been serving buyers and sellers across the commercial and residential property sectors in upstate New York, Buffalo, Rochester, Central New York, and the Capital District, among other places, since 1911. That's 109 years. I don't think you've been the chairman and CEO that long, but since you have been, you've scaled a real estate conglomerate that includes mortgage financing, title insurance, risk insurance, new home building, and other housing-related products and services that are just too many to mention. And Scott, your organization, Uniland Development, develops mixed-use, office, industrial, medical, retail, residential, academic, hospitality, and more. And as general manager of sales in the Rochester vicinity, you oversee 26 plus commercial properties and manage the operations, budgeting, long-term facilities planning, and leasing while continuing to grow the portfolio. Thank you to the three of you for taking the time from what I know are your very, very busy schedules to share your insights this morning. Let's get started. So, Jamie, you moderate 3 to 5 real estate roundtable meetings a week, which are attended by mostly upstate property owners. Were you doing this before COVID? And one way or another, what has been the progression of sentiment from the upstate property owners pre-COVID during the last 6 months? And what do you anticipate and they anticipate going forward?
So yes, to your question regarding were we doing this before COVID? So for the last 4 years or so, since I moved over to Boyle & Code, I've hosted a real estate roundtable. It's been in person, it's been monthly. And it was for about an hour where we could get investors and vendors or supporting companies in the industry to come and network, much like we just did for a period of time. And then we'd have a preset agenda on a topic, and everybody would be able to engage and learn from a guest speaker, or get some education points from the legal side of things. It's always been free. It's always been something where my goal has been to connect people. So in COVID, what I quickly realized, obviously, was we were not going to be able to do those type of roundtables again. And we, the first week of March, I actually took my roundtable on a road show to New York City, and we had our first ever New York City roundtable. Because the HSTPA is statewide and it affects a variety of groups in the entire state, we had teamed up with some real estate groups in Manhattan to put on a joint program. And the intention was that we were going to do that monthly to kind of unify the real estate industry across the state and work together collaboratively to address concerns. With COVID, that obviously even, any kind of travel wasn't going to happen. So I put together a Facebook Live at 2 o'clock every day. We were getting hundreds of people who were joining at first, trying to figure out and navigate all these executive orders that kept getting thrown at us daily. And it became kind of like a TV show, just kind of quick updates. But there was an engagement factor that was missing. And so once Zoom became the platform, we switched over to that. And every day at 2 o'clock, I would say for about 145 days straight, so 5 days a week, we were on live updating what the state of the real estate was, from multifamily to commercial, letting people vent if they needed to, educating people on where to go, what procedure was. When we got the PPP loans and the EDIL loans, it was dissecting that. I got a quasi labor law hat in COVID because a lot of the companies that we are representing are property management groups as well. They have employees. So it was navigating what they needed to do for their employees, how to handle if someone tested positive in either their company or one of the tenants that they were housing. Procedure, I have what's called Jamie ABCDEs for fair housing. So it was making sure people understood quickly policies needed to be drafted for COVID, short-term temporary policies in that nature, which now have expanded into many months of making sure those are updated. And then really navigating and dissecting daily those executive orders and then the administrative orders from the courts, how they intersected, how we got the CARES Act, and the CARES Act played into New York State laws. So really just being a resource for people to turn to, because there really wasn't any education coming from the government to kind of help people walk through that. And that's the value I found as a coalition leader, is just kind of unifying the state as someone to say, hey, if you don't know what's going on, at least you can turn in. And maybe I didn't know everything, but there were groups that were learning. Scott was very instrumental in doing programs with me in the beginning to try and really get your hands around what's happening and what can we do, what can't we do.
Yeah, wow, great. So what's the sentiment now? Do you feel like we're moving the needle, or the property owners, or things are getting better for property owners, collections are going up? I mean, I'm sorry to say that the answer to those questions probably isn't yes. What is really happening, boots on the ground right now?
We're trying to hold it together. So this is positive face, right? So yesterday we got another executive order that moved the dial back to January 1 for COVID affected tenants. My group, which is about 2,500 people, they are very compassionate for tenants. That's been our hashtag since the day we started our coalition. We recognize tenants are customers of the landlords that we service, and so it's a symbiotic relationship, but there is mounting frustration. This is the only group that has not had any support from the federal government, and it's single-handedly behind what I will call food, shelter being the number 2 thing that everybody needs. And it's a dire situation at this point for our small business landlords. They are holding on with a thread. We're seeing lots of sales contracts. We're seeing lots of inability to pay their taxes and hold on for continuity of operations. And the rent shortfall, because that dial keeps getting pushed, or the as I call it, the football marker keeps moving downfield. people are less inclined to pay the rent now than they were in the beginning of this. And that's kind of unfortunately what we're seeing, is that those numbers are not getting better, even with people going back to work.
Thank you, Jamie. Peter, I'm going to segue over to you. I think this is a good time to bring you into the conversation. You have a tremendous footprint, not just in terms of geographic locale, but also in property types and all the different aspects of the real estate industry: lending, title, transactions. Tell us what you're seeing starting back in, late February, early March, and progressing through the last 6 months, and what is happening for you in the different marketplaces.
Interesting question, and I think it would be paralleled by many companies like us around the country. Our fiscal year begins November 1st, and between November 1st and the end of February, we were up about 20% over 2019, fiscal year 2019, which was our best year in 108 years. So we were riding things pretty high and feeling pretty good about ourselves. Then March happened, and we started getting a little shaky. And then when they canceled that one basketball game, all bets were off, and we saw our business really trail off. People then fell into one of two categories. We went virtual. Fortunately, we had a platform that allowed our salespeople to work virtually, which was a blessing. We built that over the last few years. So we technologically made the switch very quickly. But we found that about half the people just said, well, wait, we don't want to buy a house without looking at it, touching it, feeling it, smelling it, walking through. We don't want to buy anything that way, so we're going to wait. So in the month of April, our business was off 54% between April of 2020 and April of 2019. May was better. We were only off 28%. And then at the end of May, we were given kind of the go-ahead to return to our offices. So we had closed 54 offices. We opened 54 offices on May 29th. And June was the best month in our 109-year history. And then July was better than that, and August was better than that. So we've had 3 successive very powerful months in terms of our history. That's all the good news. The mortgage business has been off the charts for all the reasons everybody knows. Interest rates are at historic lows. There's not enough inventory for people to buy, so they're queuing up in advance. We have a program called the pre-purchase commitment, which allows people to actually get a mortgage commitment at no cost or risk, so that when they enter the housing market, they can enter with cash. That's been a big hit. We also have a program we call Second Look, which allows us, our mortgage people, to take a look at any other pre-approval they might have received from another lender, and if we can't beat it, we give them a gift certificate. So our business, we had 2 successive months, July and August, that were about, they were 30% over our best month ever in our mortgage business. And only about 30% of our mortgage business is refinancing, so thank God. So most of the business is purchase, which is really where we want to support the rest of our organization. We're not trying to, I guess, compete with our organization. And a refinancing effectively competes with our residential sales organization, because once somebody refinances, they effectively have bought their home back from themselves, and they're going to stay for a while. So that house isn't going to come on the market. And as far as we're concerned, we can put a big X through it in terms of its availability anytime in the near future. So the big problem today is inventory. And it's going to be a big problem for a long time, because lots of people are refinancing. People are saying, where will I go if I sell my house? We hear that all the time, particularly among empty nesters. There's not enough new product to sell them. Of course, with the cost of lumber skyrocketing in the last month or so, it's been increasingly difficult to get a new house under construction. And upstate New York has historically been very low in new construction vis-a-vis the growth cities around the country, Atlanta, Orlando, Houston, cities like that. So we're kind of stuck in a very interesting position right now. We're as busy as we can possibly be, almost across the board through all our businesses. Yet there's this dark cloud that sits in my mind. I try not to tell people about it. That lack of inventory has to catch up with us sooner or later in terms of overall sales. And just to give you an idea what's happening in upstate in terms of overall unit sales, Buffalo, Niagara, the whole region, 6-county region is down 11% in units. If you go to Rochester, it's down, business in units is down, just bear with me for 2 seconds, it's down 11%. Central New York is down 7% in units. Capital region is down 10%. So the whole of Upstate's down about 10% in units, which is really, that's our number of transactions. That's across the board. That's everybody in the whole Forest City area.
So a reduction in supply is causing this downturn in the number of units that are actually being sold. And everything that you're talking about is with residential, typically primary residences, 1 to 4 family. Is that correct?
That's correct. And now
yeah. What's happening now? What happens on the other side of the spectrum?
Well, that's Jamie, I think, articulated pretty well. I mean, we're seeing in the hospitality business, our friends that own hotels and restaurants and all hospitality venues are hurting badly. The office market is, even if you've got leases, we own one fairly major office building in downtown Buffalo, and although our leases might be at 92 or 93%, we're getting paid on about 85 to 89% of those. So people are just saying, you know, I'm not paying, I'm not coming into my office. And we're between a rock and a hard place. What do we do about that? Do we go and hammer them? Do we send them nasty letters, or we try to work with them? And our objective is to work with them. So it's the commercial business. If you take hospitality, retail, office, there are 2 strong points. Apartments are still pretty strong, except where people feel like they don't have to pay, and the industrial and manufacturing sector is pretty strong. So aside from that, housing is the bright spot in the economy, according to Secretary Mnuchin. He just said that last week, and we certainly believe that. But the rest of the real estate segments that we're in are you know, it's a bit of a struggle.
Scott, I want to segue over to you now, and a perfect time to do so, as Peter was talking about retail and hospitality and office. And, you know, you are entrenched in that sector of the business. What are you seeing in terms of occupancy, changing uses, and new projects?
Well, in the hospitality market, as both Jamie and Peter had alluded to, those segments had been effectively shut down in the hospitality industry beginning late February, early March, and just recently started coming back online.
Now, does your firm actually manage any hospitality, develop and manage any hospitality?
Yes, we have actually 2 hotels that we own and operate, or one that we've developed. Hampton Inn is the first fully adaptable use hotel in the country.
And when you say adaptable use, what does that mean?
That means that it was built and designed to be fully accessible for all individuals, irrespective of their physical disabilities.
Oh, so ADA.
Yes, it is 100% ADA compliant, adaptable, and designed. Every room, every space has been designed to be adapted and accessible for everyone coming into the property without having to get any special needs allocated to that space.
And when did that go online?
That came online in the midst of the pandemic. So I believe we turned over in March or April. So that was a landmark construction project for us, being the first adaptable property in the country to be opened as being fully adaptable, and working now to try and maintain that project. And we also developed a Embassy Suites as part of a mixed-use development that we did in the early 2000s at 200 Delaware, our Avant building. And the Embassy Suites property has been hard hit, although we've been working diligently, following all the CDC and New York State requirements on bringing that property online and making a safe and secure environment for individuals to be able to come to the Western New York region.
Scott, when a lot of people hear the word mixed use that are online with us today, they probably think, if they're thinking New York City, they're thinking that apartment building that has retail on the first floor. If they're thinking more in the suburbs, it's that store on the first floor and 2 or 3 apartments above. Your definition of mixed use from a development point of view with Uniland is completely different. Why don't you tell everybody what that means?
Yeah, I mean, the property we had, I just mentioned, and an additional one we had developed within the last couple of years, were multi-story central business district properties with a hospitality component, an office, and a residential component, mostly in the condominium phase. And that project has been a huge success for us, barring the COVID pandemic situation. But even there, our project is still maintaining and servicing and operating well. Several other properties that we've ventured into include hospitality, retail, office, and residential.
So there's always a residential component in one of these mixed-use assets.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that makes it into the live, work, play type town center capacity. We have another project that we're working with partners on that is about 100 acres of property and redeveloping that into a town center development. It's over 1 million square feet of project that can be redeveloped. And that's a project that's obviously going to take a long time to come to fruition, but it's one of those that we felt the need to bring to Western New York and make sure that there is that that concept of the live, work, play town center mentality, and developing and redesigning that in a post-COVID world.
So do you think that the live, work, play concept is going to be more adaptive now that we've gone through COVID? And you know what? I'd like Jamie and Peter to chime in on that as well after you, Scott.
Yes, absolutely. I think the mentality and thought of individuals working from home, they want to be able to have services and amenities that are nearby that they don't have to worry about traveling too far to. And it becomes a small village within a locale. And then you get to know everybody, and it becomes that camaraderie and that association that people want to identify with.
You know, Jamie, I'm going to ask you a specific question based on how engaged you are with the legislative process, and you're a registered lobbyist. And when I think Midtown, which I think now has about a 10 to 15% office occupancy, isn't that a place that is ripe to readapt those buildings to a mixed use that Scott just described? And what's the possibility of getting the state and the city to actually go along with something like that?
Mm-hmm. Politics are tough here. You know, I just joined the NIOP board, so I will be able to tell you more about that probably in the next couple of months as I lobby for them as well. But I pretty much have only been lobbying for multifamily. So when we talk about mixed use with the residential component to that building, certainly one of the most devastating things that you're seeing in COVID is this affordable housing crisis, and that continues. So anytime that you can add units and add affordable housing, we've seen some buildings in Rochester actually, you know, become completely affordable housing models. I think that's a good thing for the city. There's a lack of that, and that's what leads to, for my lobbying purposes, every time we're trying to speak of something, we get rebuttals of gentrification and that we are not diversifying the new builds to be you know, for affordable for people who are already living here. And so we're forcing people out of the city who have always lived here, replacing them with high-end luxury condos that overlook the city or the water in a variety of cities. That's the arguments we keep hearing. So I think if we can do multi-dimensional housing amongst mixed use for, you know, tax purposes for affordable plus luxury, and then add, you know, work stations and things of that nature to make things much more accessible, and certainly bringing in places to eat, places to buy food. Those are very attractive options, I think, in this.
And you just closed some affordable housing projects, correct? So
we've been doing a lot of low-income tax credit properties. which has been great. But on the construction side, I've just recently closed, I'm in the middle of closing a third. One of the bright sides to COVID has been as soon as the construction industry was allowed to restart operations, we've seen, at least in my law firm, 2 huge deals, in upwards of 20 million, which for up here are big size deals in the construction realm for new development of housing. And I think that's the bright side, is one of the reasons the HSTPA was passed was because they said construction costs and development costs were too expensive in the state of New York. And so they needed to protect tenants from that. I think what we're seeing is the antithesis of that. The developers are trying to take advantage of tax credits to build those kind of units, recognizing affordable housing is a necessity. There's a shortage of it across the country, and really to offer that so that there is opportunity to add units to the state, which I think is a good thing.
Well, looking forward to hearing more from you later on after you have a little bit more of your thumb on the pulse of what's going on in that sector. Yeah, for sure. So, Peter, what's your thoughts on that last discussion we had about changing uses of existing buildings that say are 100% office or 100% retail and making them a mixed use in the type of development that Scott's company is doing?
Pre-COVID, there was a huge movement across the whole country toward what we call walkable communities, which were really a place where you could maybe park your car or take rapid transit into a location and never have to get back in a car. You could walk or ride a bike, and all the services were there in all kinds of real estate, mixed use, single use buildings, but they were close together, and there was a social component of just being able to wander around and greet your neighbors. And that was extremely popular all through upstate. Look at villages like the village of Pittsford and Rochester. Look at Hamburg in Western New York, East Aurora, the Elmwood Village, Hurdle Avenue. These are all, the village of Williamsville, these are all intensely popular areas to live because they were walkable, and they were, by their very nature, a series of mixed uses. On the outskirts of the core would largely be single-family residential or two-family residential, which were and remain very, very popular, and really we saw greatest price appreciation of any part of our real estate, residential real estate market in those areas. With the coming of COVID, the economy shifted to what has been called the homebody economy. Now, when we list a house, for example, we look around the house to see where you can put the home office. Do we convert a bedroom? Do we use the basement? Is there a den? Some place where people can work at home, which is kind of the reverse of the walkable community. We're staying put in many cases. I think that's very generally uncomfortable for people in the long run. I think it's suited people for a while. People are very anxious to get back out, and I'm sure you see this, Scott. People want to get back into the buildings. They want to get back into the sidewalk cafes. They want to go inside. They want to order a meal. They want to have dinner with friends or go out for lunch or get a cup of coffee. And they're willing to adapt. They're willing to wear masks and remain social distance, that kind of thing. But it's been kind of a monumental shift. And having said that, the properties that we do get for sale in these walkable communities remain red hot. In a mixed use building, if it's not in one building, it might be nearby. So it's really a dynamic of social interaction. We've always argued that real estate is not a bunch of bricks and mortar. It's a social phenomenon, and we have to adapt to how people behave, and what we build has to adapt, and what we sell has to adapt to how people behave, and certainly what affects that behavior is our laws, and certainly the environment that we're in today with health concerns. So it's a very, very, very unusual time. I think the walkable community is here to stay. I think what Scott is saying is 100% accurate, and also what Jamie's saying, that we have to provide affordable housing. We have to make it convenient for people to get services, and I think that's the great challenge, frankly, in the real estate world today.
So I'm thinking about kind of gathering my thoughts here on what I want the next question to be. There's a lot in the media about people taking flight from the cities and moving to more rural areas. There was actually an article in the Times last week about all the influx to different communities in Vermont. Now, you're upstate. Upstate is beautiful country in New York. You're right on the border of Canada. And there's a lot going on there. You have cities, you have these walkable communities. These are the kinds of things that people in bigger cities stay in bigger cities for. Are they saying now, you know what? I don't have to be close to my company. I can move to a more affordable place and still have the same amenities around me. What are you seeing in that trend? Or a lot of the people that are coming in and buying that are increasing sales in your organization, is that people that are coming from other places, other states, other places in New York?
Well, it's interesting. I love that term, a lot. What is a lot? I don't know, but I can give you a couple examples. In Albany in particular, we're seeing more than a few people coming up the Hudson and saying, well, Albany's not such a bad place. There's a lot of things to do in this town. It's a pretty cosmopolitan little city. I think I could live just as comfortably here as I could in New York, and it's about half price or less. In Buffalo, we're seeing some of that. Central New York, probably a little more. Albany is the most. Rochester to some extent. Just to give you an example, my daughter and my son-in-law both work in Manhattan. They bought a condominium in Brooklyn for something like $950,000. They wound up leasing that because they had a baby, and they rented a 2-bedroom apartment. They were so proud of this thing that invited me down there pre-COVID. I'm looking at this thing, and they thought it was 1,000 square feet. It wasn't anywhere near 1,000 square feet, at least not by my sense of measurement. Anyway, they were so proud of this thing. What did they do just last week? They bought a house here in Buffalo for much less than they paid for their 1-bedroom condominium in Brooklyn, and they've got a space and a yard and a beautiful house that's all redone. So there is some of that, but I wouldn't say, Bill, that it's overwhelming. I think people are just, the ones that are totally fed up are likely to go and have the means. They're likely to go to a home they already own. There's a lot of second homeowners out of Manhattan that moved out to the Hamptons and haven't come back. We hear a lot of that. Connecticut, New Jersey, northern New Jersey, Westchester County. My other kids live in Westchester County, and they were holed up there perfectly happy on 2 acres. So there is some of that. I don't think it's an overwhelming flow, but I think what really will happen, and I'd love to hear from the people that on this conversation that are working solely in New York, but I think what's going to happen is that once people can actually get back out and walk around, that they'll be much happier staying in New York. But being holed up in 1,000 square feet or 900 square feet is not exactly a lot of people's idea of a good time.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that. My apartment is 580 square feet. I'm in the financial district of Manhattan, and it's kind of open space here a little bit with the rivers and the New York Harbor. So it's a little bit easier, but I definitely wouldn't want to be stuck in this apartment in a more dense part of the city. Scott, what are your thoughts around all of this?
Yeah, I think we've seen some of the migration from downstate, New York, the 5 boroughs coming up to this area, but I believe the largest migration is actually out of the state, unfortunately, with the ability to telecommute and work remotely, and without a foreseeable idea of when that's going to really come to an end. That's where the biggest issue is right now, is a negative population trend for New York State. New York City and the boroughs has been fairly stable with some level of appreciation in terms of population, but the rest of the 7 or 8 regions of New York State have had a negative growth factor over the last 10 years. And I don't see that trend stemming anytime soon. Some of the shift from some of the areas may be going to less costly areas, from tier 1 to tier 2 or 3 properties in cities. And that's been beneficial for us. and also the diversity of having alternate locations for corporate headquarters or offices sprouting up in multiple cities so that companies can remain active and viable when an outbreak or situation occurs.
Scott, does your organization manage or own and manage any 100% retail or malls?
Yes, we do. And that's been one of the...
Yeah, how's that performing at this
Those
time?
those are significantly underperforming. Retail right now is, unless you are in one of the essential type businesses in a large big box entity, a large grocery store in this upstate area would be Wegmans, or you're into a Walmart type scenario, your retail business is reliant on the ability for online purchases and sales. It's not been a very good situation for a lot of retailers. The restaurant businesses have floated precariously along that edge of trying to survive by adapting as much as they can. Unfortunately, with the inclement weather coming in upstate, and Rochester gets about 103 inches of snow a year, Buffalo close to the same, Syracuse about 110 inches. That's going to be the significant challenge for any retail and restaurant situation coming in and trying to find a way to survive, because they're not going to have that outdoor venue.
You need those igloos. There's going to be a company, whoever provides those igloos with heat lamps is going to make a fortune.
Yeah. Actually, that was a big thing on the rooftops of New York City hotels last year.
Great.
And someone posted a picture on Facebook over the weekend. I think they were up and down Broadway. And I said, wow, that is what you were going to see all winter long. These little igloos with heat lamps and the snow coming down, and it's going to be and the streets still being open to having that space taken up by the restaurants, because in New York City, they actually said that they can go ahead and do that throughout the winter, and they're going to make it permanent. And you're going to have all these little villages that are popping up all over the place with these igloos. So that's going to be interesting to see. Scott, with the retail, are you experiencing vacancies?
Yes, we've had vacancies, and we've had some tenants that have had to shut down. I mean, because they have no revenue. The PPP money expired. There's no foreseeable change of that happening in the near future. And with people not being able to get out and do anything, either for personal fear of COVID and or their concern of transmitting that to other people or to the endangered population, the elderly, infirmed, immunocompromised, and their children. So they're hesitant going out to locations to try and do anything. There are a number of people that are out and about and trying to keep local businesses afloat. My wife and I, we frequent several restaurants as best we can and take care of things there, buy and tip well. I mean, because we know, having a daughter that worked in the restaurant type business, that staff rely on that for their mainstay of income. And that goes over into their ability to pay for their housing and their necessities. So people that were middle income with a hospitality type job are now lower middle income or upper lower income, and having a very difficult time trying to maintain a level of lifestyle that is what they want to have, and even sacrificing a number of things. So yes, it's been a significant impact on the retail industry, as I can see.
Is there an opportunity to use that retail space in a different way and pivot, or you're just going to wait it out?
It's tough to say. I mean, some of the retail we have is not conducive to be able to transition into like an industrial facility. Some of the locations that have encountered that have an ability to pivot into an industrial warehouse situation from the retail sector. Office is really not an option really going into it. Some residential might be going into some of the malls and situations that exist, because a lot of those are now empty.
So some of the things that we've been talking about are the consequences of what we've been experiencing over the last 6 months. But let's pivot from consequences and go to opportunities. What are some of the bright spots that are coming out of this? And I know, Jamie, the other day when we were preparing for this, you mentioned cannabis.
Mm-hmm. So what I've been trying to get my group to think critically on is not to, get their hopes lost in that New York is a territory that shouldn't be, or a state that shouldn't be looked at anymore. There are lots of opportunities for diversification. Where there are industries or classes of property that are hurting, there are others that are just hot. Cannabis is one of them. My law firm actually has a full cannabis practice. One of our associates is, for the last 3 or 4 years, has actively been writing the legislation with the assembly sponsor for the cannabis bill in New York State. And so we've been on the front lines of this for a while. Obviously, it's not legal in New York State right now, but the hemp market is. And so working through the verticals of the licensing requirements, when and if this is an industry that does get legalized in the state, and then recognizing opportunities in other states. I think some of it is education to clients to show that they don't necessarily have to leave the state to be able to invest in other property in other areas that are legalized right now. So we've just been doing a bunch of education. I run this roundtable, as you know, every day. We're going to be doing a 3-part cannabis series in the next month to educate clients as to the legalities, New York State versus federal. And of course, with the presidential change, this may lead you to other questions here, but there is some very big differences between the candidates and what could happen in many industries. Real estate is really something that it may pivot us in a completely different area, and it may take away some very valuable tools depending on who the next president is. So cannabis definitely something that we will be talking about, and if not the hottest topic that keeps coming up in real estate.
Yeah, and then tonight is the debate. That should be interesting, and everyone's got to get out and vote.
For sure.
And you got to vote for one of the 2 people that are running, because if you're writing somebody else, you're going to lose your vote.
Very true.
And I'm not going to say who to vote for. That's your business, but get out and vote. Otherwise, whatever happens, you don't have any say in it. And that's what we got to look at. Scott, what do you think in terms of opportunities?
Oh, I think there's tremendous opportunities, and it would be nice once we can get the north border open, because we've had a lot of inquiries and interest from Canadian companies to come down and set up in New York State to be able to operate. And we're fielding questions and calls from people right now that unfortunately we can't accommodate any of their businesses. And we have some international clients, the same thing. They have a significant inability to come in and service and maintain any of their business opportunities and expand. So we definitely need the economy and the borders and the controls to be regulated so that it allows international commerce to really come in.
So what's been the holdup there?
The federal and New York State government. I mean, the regulations that the border is effectively closed to anything other than goods transportation between the 2 countries. So there's been no ability for other activities to come in.
And that's coming from the U.S. side of the border, not the Canadian side of the border?
Yes, I believe so. I'm not sure that Canada has the same. I believe they have some regulations, but I couldn't speak specifically to that. I'm not well versed in that yet.
Peter, Jamie, you know any more about that?
Just that they keep, just like Jamie's saying, they keep pushing the goalposts out, and it's getting worse all the time. And I think that what I think it is, I think it's just kind of a head-to-head battle between Trump and Trudeau. I just think this has become childish, and there's no good reason for it that I can see.
What do you see as the opportunities, Peter?
Well, we see great opportunities right now because I think there's going to be in all industries, there's going to be a flight to strength. And we believe that we have to position ourselves, our own organization, as the strongest organization from a perspective of expertise in the markets we serve and in the businesses that we're in. So we've invested heavily over the last couple of years, reinvested heavily in our whole career development portion of our business at all levels, because we believe that if we're better at our job and we develop greater expertise, that there will be a movement towards us as people seek to get a job done. That's one.
And you actually have a footprint in the state of Arizona, is that right?
Yes, and that's another opportunity that we see. One of the things that's happening out there is that the industry itself is the Wild West of the real estate industry, and you see bizarre things that would bore all of you on this call. But the fact of the matter is that we see great opportunity there because there's over 50,000 licensees in the Phoenix metropolitan market. That's crazy. I mean, if you do the number, if you look at the average, that means that everybody's selling 2 houses. How can anybody be any good at anything if you only do it twice a year? I think that's absurd. So we looked at this and we decided that through technology that maybe we could take half the commission and make it just go away through the development of an alternative brokerage model that we call Revenue. And in that model, you can actually list your home and get what most agents would describe as full service for free. We have upgrades, obviously, an a la carte service. We're now developing the opposite of that, which is how do you engage in a showing, maybe without an agent. So we've developed through a technology partner of ours here in Western New York, what we call the agentless showing, which is basically technology in a box that you plug into your wall and put a couple cameras around, and it's amazing technology. So we think there's going to be downward pressure on fees, and we want to be in a position to at least have experimental operation where we can take a look at this whole thing and say, well, gee, maybe we can strip some of the cost out of the transaction by really implementing technology that already exists for the betterment of the customer. Our industry talks to itself. We talk about the agents, agents talk to agents, agents talk to the broker, but we forget the customer sometimes. If you ask the customer, this kind of came to light. I went on a fishing trip the other day, and my guide said to me, "What do you guys actually do? What do you actually do for all that money?" You know, and we think we do a lot, but he said, "What do you mean? People just buy a house because they like it, don't they? I mean, what do you have to do to sell a house? What do you have to do to list a house? Everything sells in 2 minutes today for a list price." He had a point. But the bottom line for me is that we have to be on the other side of that. We have to be examining other ways that people can go out buying and selling homes. And that's what we're involved with in Arizona, among other things.
Yeah. And do you think some of that technology is going to overflow into the commercial and multifamily sector?
I think it'll be harder there because it's a more complex transaction.
Right.
And I would say there's an emotional component. The residential transaction is almost purely emotional once you figure out where you fit financially.
Right.
But all aspects of commercial have an intellectual or a technical component that really requires professional interpretation, in my opinion.
Thank you. So our time is coming to a close soon. Is that right, Rick? We got about 5 minutes left. Rick, you were muted.
Yeah, we are coming to a close.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes left. I have one more question for.
Well, actually, I have a question.
Oh, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, how big did you say your apartment was?
It's 580 square feet. It's a really cool apartment, but it's 580 square feet.
Well, I have a walk-in closet I can rent you. That's even bigger than that.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. So, Scott, Jamie, and Peter, I'm going to ask you all a question. You can answer it if you want. You don't have to if you don't want to. But if you woke up tomorrow, and we're going to go Jamie, Scott, and Peter. If you woke up tomorrow and something in the real estate world had changed forever, what do you wish that would be? Jamie?
We would never use the word landlord ever again. We would get rid of that word in its entirety, and we would rebrand property owners as good people providing a very necessary affordable housing backbone that supports, you know, things like Section 8. And we would be able to work together with tenant associations to make the housing industry work better. That would
and that's what under one roof is all about, right? It's like the property owners and the tenants, we're all under the same roof. Mm-hmm. Why are we fighting with each other all the time? So I think that's an amazing sentiment and lovely, very lovely.
Yeah, we are still miles away, and you know, I try and forge it working with groups, but I think that if that would happen and we could stand together in lobbying efforts, then it would push things to be, you know, us against the government instead of opposing each other, and things might get done.
Yeah. All right, great. And Scott, if you woke up tomorrow, something in the real estate world to change forever, what would it be?
Taxes. I would encourage and enjoy the opportunity to be in a low tax or no tax environment, both on the development side and on the personal consumer side. That will benefit development, home ownership, resident tenants, in every sector of society.
So we need an alternative way to have taxes fuel the budgets of the federal, state, and local governments. How do we do that?
Well, see, there are, 32 other states that, well, actually 49 other states that seem to do a decent job with lower tax rates, lower tax revenue, to be able to operate both in state and on a federal basis. So we have to find ways that other states are doing it and find a way that make that beneficial for everybody.
So let's get all those state governors on a Zoom meeting and have them talk to, you know, we'll have our people call your people.
Exactly.
Right. And Peter, if you woke up tomorrow and something in the real estate world changed forever, what would it be?
Well, I'd second what Scott says, because taxes steal equity. That's all they do. They just rob people of equity. So that'd be number one. But the other, what I'd like to see is a balance between supply and demand in the residential sector. If we had that, a lot of good things would happen for everybody.
Any other thoughts, folks?
No.
All right. Well, we must answer all the questions because we didn't get any.
Yeah, no, there weren't any questions, so you must have been very informative.
Yes, right. I hope you enjoyed it.
And I want to thank you, Bill Widener. Did a great job. I also want to thank Bill helping me connect with Jamie, who then in return connected with Scott. So I want to thank those three for joining us this morning. You know, Jamie must know everyone in the whole state of New York, because she did this in a matter of 2 days, I think. So I do appreciate that. And Bill has been a big support of what we do. So I appreciate that as well, Bill. I know everyone, and you can't hear it, but I know everyone is standing and applauding and whistling. You know, you all did a great job. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. The three of you did a great job. Rick, thanks so much for asking me to moderate. This was fun. I enjoyed it. And just everyone out there, these three people, you must contact them and get to know them. These people are true leaders in our industry. They really care about what's happening in New York State. They're committed to New York State. The New York Real Estate Journal is committed to New York State in addition to New England. We won't get into a Red Sox-Yankees conversation. And you know what? I'm not leaving the 580 square foot apartment in the financial district of Manhattan. I really, really love living here. I really love being here. And we're all going to come back and we're going to emerge victorious.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for attending. I also want to, before we leave, I want to thank our sponsors one more time because they're so important. I'd like to thank Yadi, Kalka, FIA Capital Partners, Ward Cascignano, and our annual sponsor, US Pavement. If anyone has any information they want to share on the New York Real Estate Journal, they can contact me. I'd just go to nyrej.com and you can submit all your information there or find the publisher in your area. Thank you all. Have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching today's interview. If you'd like to be a guest, a sponsor, or even advertise in the New England Real Estate Journal, you'll find our contact information in the description box below. You can also find all our social media platforms so you can follow us, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.